Give you a little bit of an update about a few issues that I think are pretty important to report on. Let's go first to the ComEd trial, which I am, honestly captivated by because I lived through much of the corruption that they are exposing now in the trial. So I find it's kind of interesting to me to read some of the more backstory stuff that I wasn't aware of that is coming out in the trial. So the latest is that they had one of Mike Madigan's right-hand mans, one of the people that really worked in his precinct, in his ward, side by side with him for decades. They had him on the stand recently, and that guy's name is Edward Moody. So the Chicago Tribune, of course, is covering it, as is the Sun-Times. I've been picking up the Trib stories primarily, and they've been doing kind of a little bit of more of a blow-by-blow. And in this stuff, I want to start out by reading from the Tribune. They talk about Ed Moody and exactly who he is. They say that Ed Moody is a legendary precinct captain for the former House Speaker, and he told juries in the ComEd 4 bribery trial Tuesday that the Speaker arranged a $45,000 a year contract with one of the utility's top lobbyists, but made it clear that the deal would disappear if they stopped working on campaigns. So that's pretty important. I mean, that's obviously pay to play. That's obviously, doing campaign work, using ComEd money to do campaign work, and doing it to get curry favor with Mike Madigan. It's so obvious what's going on here. I don't know how the jury's going to decide that these guys aren't all guilty of a bribery scheme. They should be. Anyway, it goes on. Ed Moody, for years, one of Madigan's top door knockers, recounted without hesitation the Speaker's warning that when he told Moody about the deal. I control that contract, and if you stop doing political work, you'll lose that contract. Okay, so how did this all come about? Well, Moody testified that McLean told him that the contract was a hell of a plum and that I owed the Speaker big time. Under the deal arranged by the Speaker, Moody testified that he spent the next 7 years collecting monthly checks from ComEd funneled through a series of Madigan's associates, mostly for doing nothing. Moody said Madigan also helped him land a job with the Cook County Chief Judge's Office and later blessed his appointment as a county commissioner, all following outstanding performances on the ground pushing Democratic candidates in federal and state legislative races. Okay, so that was their job. Their job was basically to door knock for very, very competitive state legislative races. They got very good at doing it. They learned their trade right in Madigan's ward, right in his precinct, where Madigan essentially found these two brothers, Fred and Ed Moody, literally walking the streets. I mean, that's the testimony here. That's what's come out here. Literally walking the streets. They said, yeah, we used to. He says that I worked for White Castles. I worked for a security firm, maintenance, Moody said. Moody said that when he was in his mid-20s, he and his brother would sometimes run into Madigan during their long walks in the West Lawn neighborhood. He basically said, this is what's reported in the Chicago Tribune. My twin brother and I loved to walk. We literally could walk 4 or 5 hours at a crack, he said. When they bumped into Madigan, he'd pause to talk politics, Moody said. So he gets picked up by Madigan to essentially, knock on doors, and they do very, very well for him. It goes on to say that Moody and his brother volunteered on U.S. Rep. Bill Lipinski's campaign for Congress in the early 90s, helping circulating petitions in his redrawn district that pitted him against another Democrat incumbent. They won. They met the Speaker in the 13th ward office, and they decided to be dispatched as precinct captains. The article goes on to say that being a precinct captain, Moody said he was really about building relationships and building rapport and almost becoming a member of their family. But it was also about winning elections, connecting them to city services, county services, and state service. So you win the election, and then you connect the people that you knocked on the doors with. You surround them and say, well, what do you need for city services? How can I help you with the county? Do you have a problem with getting state services? So this is a full service thing. Like, you vote the way we want, we come back, we help you through with some city services. Oh boy. Moody said he loved going door to door and meeting new people and convincing them to vote for his candidate. So this is what they do. These brothers, they worked at White Castle before. He said it. He worked a maintenance job, that's what he did. And now all of a sudden he's just simply knocking doors, winning campaigns for Madigan. Then it goes on. Essentially he moves up the political food chain, and he essentially says that he did not have to apply for a job. Their successes. He got a county highway department job. And was a jury coordinator for the chief judge. And he said, I didn't have to apply for the job. Madigan got it for me. Yep, you're rewarded with jobs in the Democrat Party. That's how it works. You're rewarded with jobs. I recall a long-term politician who was in the same class as Blagojevich, who said to us, he was recounting a story how Blagojevich asked him, well, how many jobs you got? And he's like, well, I do this, and I'm, a state rep. And he's like, no, how many jobs you got? And Blagojevich literally meant, how many jobs did you get? How many jobs did you get to reward your political supporters with after winning an election? Well, that only works on the Democrat side, to my knowledge. Only the Democrat side. That's where it works. Anyway, Moody went on in this article saying, I wasn't like traditionally interviewed because I already had the job, said Moody, who worked in the Bridgeview branch for 23 years and performed political work in the evenings and weekends. Anyway, it comes down to where, Madigan, they got upset. They wanted a boost in salary. They wanted a lobbyist job. So Madigan says, hey, calm down. You're going to get your contract. You're going to make your $45,000 a year. And that's when Moody says he was sent to McLean. And McLean handed him, literally for his $45,000 a year, a list of legislators and told him to call and ask if they had any issues with ComEd. So this is where now the ComEd's part of it comes in. So they get moved off of, strictly just knocking doors. Although they're still doing that, by the way. They're still doing that. They want more money, though. So he brings them to ComEd for a lobbying contract, and their only job is to essentially call 9 legislators and see if they have any issues with ComEd. That's all they're asked to do. That's all they're asked to do. Anyway, so this was a pretty significant look into Madigan's, political machine where it had never been looked into before. These twins, Fred and Ed Moody, were dispatched all over the state when Madigan needed to turn around voters in a critical legislative district in the heat of a campaign. That was their job. Their job was to literally knock doors. And eventually that led him to have to work through other lobbyists. And so it says here that Moody testified that now Doherty told him to keep knocking doors, reference to political field work on behalf of the Speaker's campaign. So eventually they get moved to working with Doherty, who is instructed to give them quote unquote ComEd work to do. But Doherty basically tells them, just keep knocking doors for the Speaker. That's all you're supposed to do. Then it gets a little dicey. Moody was appointed Cook County Commissioner in 2016, and he had to be moved from Doherty's account because of potentially bad optics, according to the trial testimony. As a workaround, Moody's payments started coming from 2 other intermediaries allied with Madigan who did contract work for ComEd. One of the intermediaries was Shaw DeCramer, a Democratic House staffer for Madigan who became a lobbyist but was ousted from the Speaker's political operation after a lawmaker complained that he was abusive while working on campaigns. Well, the campaign that Shaw DeCramer is accused of being abusive on was none other than Deb Conroy. Deb Conroy is now the DuPage County chairperson. And, the rumor going around there was that literally Shaw DeCramer got extremely handsy with Deb Conroy, literally lifted her up and threw her over his shoulder during the campaign. And, Deb Conroy, for one thing, didn't say anything at that time. I mean, at that time, she waited until about the 2017 timeframe when they started to come out with the hashtag Me Too movement and all that stuff was going down. And then finally, she comes clean about how she was literally manhandled by this guy, Shaw DeCramer. That's what happened. But, not until it was comfortable did she say anything in the open about what DeCramer did. No, she hid it all until, it became politically okay to come out and say that. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Another, of course, intermediary was John Bradley, just some sort of he was a former House Democrat. I served with him as well at the time. He's really a nobody. But anyway, I'm reading through this and I'm thinking about all these names that are coming up now and all the way that they handled politics under Mike Madigan. It was top heavy. It was do what the speaker says. It was literally dispatching these people to go knock on doors. And so, you know, a lot of people got a door knock, even in this last election, where the Democrat Party is following the same thing that Mike Madigan put up. Now they're doing it in all these local races too. I mean, JB Pritzker funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars down to the local Democrat parties to do smear campaigns against good-hearted folks, good-hearted parents who just decide they want to get up and run for school board, never been politically involved again, but all of a sudden these guys are extremists, they're insurrectionists, they're painting them as all sorts of right-wing nut jobs when it's far from the truth. But this is exactly what the Democrat Party does. They'll knock on these doors, independents, Democrats. They'll smear good people that have played by the rules their entire life, by the way, pay their taxes on time, good citizens, all of the above, don't get in trouble with the law. And they'll have these thugs, people like Ed and Fred Moody, knock on the door and tell these voters a bunch of crap. And that's how they get the vote out. So who's to blame in all this? Well, there's a lot of blame to go around. The voters, partly, honestly, for not figuring it out. Certainly the Democrat Party for smearing good people and denigrating them. Definitely the Democrats in Springfield who still exist in Springfield, who still have their seats in Springfield, who have sat there for 20 years, Bob Rita, Jay Hoffman, you name them, Kelly Burke. These people are awful. They're all there because Madigan let them stay there. Madigan worked their campaigns. Madigan put them in power. And all these other new reps, same thing, same playbook. That's what they're doing. And nobody's better off for it. Nobody is. But you know, until the voters wake up and put two and two together and figure out that in Illinois, it doesn't come up to be 4. It comes up to you being screwed over by their policies. High taxes, special carve-outs for special folks, you name it, woke indoctrination, abortion capital of the world, you name it. Illinois now, especially with BJ in charge of the city of Chicago, lights out. Lights out. But you know what, voters, you own it because you voted for it. All right, moving on. One more thing that's just so really annoying. You probably missed it, but, you know, back on, let me find it. Yeah. Back on March 12th. Oh, wait, nope, sorry. Back on March 31st, Governor Pritzker made his 41st declaration of the pandemic emergency. 41st. That is 3 years or 1,114 days after the pandemic, after his first disaster declaration on March 12th, 2020. 1,114 days later, he issued his 41st declaration. Now, he said that his announcement said that his emergency powers will end the same day that President Biden ends the federal government's own emergency powers. That it was set to end. That was May 11th. Well, guess what? Biden ended it early. Reading from a New York Post, President Biden signed a bill Monday evening ending the COVID-19 national emergency more than 3 years after it went into effect. Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump, issued the proclamation on March 2020 and temporarily expanded the executive branch's power to steer funds to battle the virus. Biden signed a bill Monday that put an end to the COVID-19 national emergency. It's unclear what immediate effect Biden's signature will have on linked U.S. policies, such as immigration policy and his student debt forgiveness plan. He signed legislation behind closed doors, blah, 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 la, la, la. So we'll see what's going to happen with JB Pritzker's now that Biden ended it early. Will he still keep it in effect till May 11th? Or will it end, you know, is he going to sign a proclamation ending it ASAP? I mean, you would hope so, because this has just gone on for so long. He's only doing it to grab any federal funding that he possibly can to still protect people that are on expanded Medicaid provisions from the federal emergency, coming in and providing for that, instead of taking these people, able-bodied, single able-bodied adults off the Medicaid rolls and saying, why don't you go get a job? That's the only reason he's doing this is to protect his constituencies. That's all he's doing. He's a total disaster. The disaster is him. The disaster is not the pandemic. The disaster is Joe Biden. Okay, one last thing that I wanted to cover on this short Facebook Live is, I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but we now have 3 universities, 3 4-year state universities that have gone on strike. Okay, it started with Chicago State University last Monday. Then Eastern Illinois University went on strike Thursday. And then this morning, Governor State University went on strike as well. Now, here's my thing. Okay, you overpriced, overeducated professors. Guess what? If you want to be treated as a professional, which you all want to pretend that you're professionals, after all, you like to flout your degrees, your multiple degrees in many cases. Why don't you just go negotiate your own pay, your own benefits, and your own contract with your employer? Why the unionization of professionals at that level? I've never understood it. It's my biggest problem with these teacher unions. You're usually letting somebody else contract your pay, and you want me to pretend like you're a professional with your master's or your PhD. It's just so obnoxious, because guess what? Millions upon millions of other Americans, in fact, the vast majority of Americans, contract their own benefits, pay with their employer. They have no problem doing it, by the way, and they get paid well to do in many cases. Why can't you? Why can't you? It's just absolute nonsense. And then consider this. So Chicago State University, okay, last year's statistics, their 4-year graduation rate was 5%. 4-year graduation rate of 5%. 100 kids come in, 4 years later, only 5 graduate. Well, what's their 6-year graduation rate? Because now that's apparently the normal graduation time from college. You've got to be kidding me. 6-year graduation rate, 20%. 20%. So at Chicago State, 34 kids out of 162 students. 34 graduates out of 162 students. Uh-huh. Yeah. That's like, I think their budget's like $43 million or something like that. 34 students graduated. Now, many of those kids, quite frankly, are low income. All right, no problem. I have no problem with that. I have a problem with people that get pushed into an academic program and can't make it through, and possibly took on some student loans that are now essentially worthless to them, but they have to pay back. The other problem here is that, and I was looking at all this is all on the Illinois Board of Higher Education's website. You can go ahead and look at it yourself. I'm not making up these statistics. Nothing, all this is truthful. But I was looking at because I've always been interested in this. How many students pay the full boat? How many of them pay the full boat in the state of Illinois? And the reason this is partly interesting is because I was in a conversation back when I was the state legislator at the University of Chicago, and I was a little bit shocked when the president, there was a small group of us, 7 of us in his conference room. There was only 7 of us. Myself, Mike Conley, the state senator at that time, and then the president and 4 other staffers. That was it. That's all that's in the room. We have this conversation, and he was very proud of the fact that about 40% of the students that go to the UIC pay $1,500 or less for their education a year. What? $1,500 or less? That's all you pay? That can't be right. Well, I think he's absolutely right, because guess what? Overall, again, looking at all of our public university systems, 4-year, 32% of resident students paid 0 tuition and fees. Nothing. They paid nothing. 32%. Another 13% paid less than 25% of their tuition and fees. An additional 9 to 10% paid less than half of the cost of any tuition and fees. That's a huge discount for a lot of people. And I bring that up because when you graduate only 20% of your people, and you now know that taxpayers funded, probably fully funded in many cases, those students where they paid no tuition and fees, and then they went to school and only 20% of them could graduate after 6 years. You got to wonder where's the accountability for the taxpayers? Where is it? Okay, looking at Governor's state, their 4-year graduation rate is 10%. Their 6-year graduation rate is 16%. Last year, they had 32 graduates out of 203. At EIU, they better school, 35% 4-year graduation rate, 51% 6-year graduation rate. Okay. And I did notice that about 70% of Governor's state students were Pell Grant recipients, and those are likely the students that are low income and probably had all their tuition and fees paid for. So on top of a Pell Grant, they probably paid nothing else as well. So that's a lot of people that got paid to go to school and learn something and be productive, for which only after 6 years in college, 16% graduated. So the whole picture here is, where's the accountability in the system? I don't know, but it's definitely something that we need to talk about. And if you've been paying attention to anything in Springfield, they've been having quote unquote budget hearings. This is when they'll bring in the universities, or they'll bring in whatever government agency that they're talking about their budget, about their budget, and they'll have them testify about what they're doing. And I was speaking with a particular state senator the other day, and he said, we got 40 minutes. The University of Illinois came in to testify to their budget request. 40 minutes. 40 minutes. And their budget is ginormous. Couple $2 billion. We get 40 minutes to pick over their budget. That's it? I mean, it's completely dysfunctional down there. How they prioritize their time as state legislators and what they look into. Completely dysfunctional. And on another note, because I know people like to pretend that the state does not pay sufficiently into the higher education. That is not true. I just looked at SHEEO, SHEEO. You can look at them. They do a lot of higher education analysis on things. One of the charts that they come out with is how much does every state contribute per full-time equivalent to the cost of an education. Well, again, and I've been tracking this for probably 5 years now. Again, Illinois, actually, we're up one position, in my opinion. We are number 3 in the United States, behind only Wyoming and the District of Columbia, for our state appropriations amount per full-time equivalent. And they have it pegged at about $18,800. That's what they say. So we're number 3. It's not like we're not supplying money to our higher educations through state support. We actually are. We're number 3. Now, the fact that about 40% of that allocation goes to pay legacy pension costs, hey, that's their problem. They came up with that. That's their problem. They've had a problem with the pension system. They've never fixed this problem with the pension system. But even if you take that aside, if you take away the fact that about 40% of that state appropriation goes for legacy pensions, we're still, in the top half. We're still in the top half in terms of state support per full-time equivalent. So just another issue that needs to be handled at the state. So, hey, good news. Maybe we'll hear from Pritzker today or tomorrow. Maybe he'll end the emergency pandemic in the state of Illinois. Maybe he'll get with the program. Or maybe he's just, I don't know, maybe he's in Wisconsin at his farm there, or maybe he's at his ranch in Florida. Who knows where he might be. But all we know is that it never mattered to him anyway that he had an emergency declaration on the pandemic. It was all for show. He shipped his family out of the state of Illinois during the height of the pandemic. Don't forget about that. He wasted gobs and gobs of our tax money, too. Well, it's all coming to an end. And, when it comes to an end, guess what? So will the accountability. Nobody's going to look back and find out, where did all that unemployment fraud go? Thanks for joining me on this Facebook Live.